Hello and welcome to the Philippines. Thousands of foreigners in the past years have started a business, bought a business, got involved in managing a business, put their wives or girlfriends into business, invested in businesses here, got involved in management of businesses. In the coming years, thousands more foreigners are going to get involved in the businesses, one size, shape, or another. And this video is about doing that, what some of the government requirements are, some of the steps that you should take and be aware of. So for those of you who might be inclined, and I will tell you that I've been approached a number of times by people that I've met, I've found that there are many opportunities here, and you want to do your due diligence, but especially during this time, there's going to be many businesses for sale. Many people have just not been able to hang on to their businesses, so there might be some opportunities. If you've got money, if you've got time, effort, some knowledge, and you've got the desire to do something like that. Anyway, I'm very fortunate to have met a fella who's involved in a number of businesses. JR has a visa consulting business with a couple locations. He's got a real estate brokerage business, and he also has a lawyer and accountant on staff, as well as others who have experience in businesses, managing businesses. So I'm going to interview him, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and we're going to discuss some of the legalities there. So take it away, JR.
For aside from the visa and the real estate segments or business segments that we have, we also offer the business consultancy. The business consultancy revolves mainly on our services for us to guide you on setting up the business or having your business registered here in the Philippines, especially for those foreigners also who have been here and wanting to do something out of his retirement life and planning to set up a business. Either will be a single proprietorship or a corporation per se. And also the business consulting also guide you in terms of the renewals, because sometimes there are things that you need to do. It depends really on which city are you in. If you're in a bigger city, expect that it will be the process might be tedious in terms of the renewals. And if you will be on the urban areas or the provincial areas, it depends if that provincial areas would be a tourist spot or a tourist area. So that would be also different from the normal urban or local government unit here in the Philippines. Also, we're gonna give you also on the compliances side, because once you set up a corporation, there will be compliances along the way on a yearly basis that you need to report to the SEC or the Securities and Exchange Commission, and also for your compliances for the tax office, or what we call here in the Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR, and also for your compliances with other mandatory deductions once you have some employees of hand to your company. So basically, the business consulting will be running you all throughout the steps of how you do business here in the Philippines. This is not to discourage everyone that it would be tedious, but this is just an informative video along with Rod for us to give you an insight or information on how would be the procedure come into place here in the Philippines, because pretty well Philippines is way different from the US. So the way you do things in the US might be too different here in doing things in the Philippines. For the cultural side or probably on the political side, it's way different. I have not been to the US, but I have begun to understand the culture slightly by talking to our Western clients, and gives me an idea on how they run their things also. Not the full idea, but eventually this video is made for us to guide you. Now, when you do your registration here in the Philippines, the first thing you need to do is to figure out what type of company are you setting up. If you're doing, for a foreigners at that situation, you may actually set up a corporation. So a corporation is governed by the Corporation Code of the Philippines, in which there would be a 60-40 rule. 60% in terms of shares, but that should be on the Filipino side in terms of the incorporators or the first owners, and the foreigner can actually own up to 40%. That setup will be for the Philippine domestic corporation. So there are a lot of types of corporation. There will be foreign corporations that was set up in the US that and would like to have a foreign branch here in the Philippines. That would be a different story, because that will be forming part into a different type of corporation. Now, apart from that, it also boils down also to the industry. Well, what kind of industry are you trying to do business with? If you're trying to do a BPO here in the Philippines, there might be instances on how you set up the corporation or the BPO, your ownership might go above 40%. So, speaking of that, after you have your corporation to be set up, it should be filed, or not set up, but to be processed for the registration. Normally, it would take around 1 to 2 months for you to have the corporation certificate from the SEC, which is a Securities and Exchange Commission. And once the corporation will be registered, you'll have a certificate on that specific date upon the issuance. Now, step number 2 of that, once you have those certificate being issued to you, you then have now 30 days to have that one registered to the tax office. It's what we call the BIR here, is the Bureau of Internal Revenue, to the local, to the jurisdiction where is that revenue district is located. By the way, a revenue district is an tax office which has a jurisdiction within the city. Like a portion of the city will be under this jurisdiction. So that is, they have their own scope of doing that as well, because there will be imposing you some tax requirements upon registration also for the tax office. Beyond that 30 days or the 5th day of the following month, then that will be, they will be imposing you now a penalty. Now, those are the things that you need to have figure out along the process, because we have also one client that assumed that after he had the certificate of incorporation from the SEC, that's way back 2018, and eventually he has not able to have that one registered from the Bureau, not the Bureau of Immigration, but the Bureau of Internal Revenue, I mean the tax office. He was being penalized, because right then and then, you are already obliged to have that one registered into the next branch or the government office here in the Philippines for them to have it properly registered. I mean, having set up from the SEC for the corporation does not guarantee that you will have it running already as a business. You need to register that in step number 2, which is the BIR or the tax office. Now, once you will be registered in the BIR, you will be then issued with another certificate from the BIR in which what we call BIR COR, meaning Certificate of Registration 2303. So that will be forming part of the business name and your registration date, and you'll have a tax identification number of the company, and at the same time it also shows there your what do you call that, obligations already on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, or a yearly basis for you to file your tax returns, regardless if you have an income or not. So after the BIR, then you now then proceed to the business permit. The business permit is where the permit that you will obtain, aside from the 2 other registration on the city that you want to do business with. Like for example, if you want to do business in Cebu City, you need to apply for a business permit in Cebu City. Now, if you have the SEC going back on the national level, you can then and once it's already already registered in SEC for the corporation, then you have now the chance to choose which city would you like to do business with. If you wanted to go to Manila, you can do so, registered in the BIR in Manila, and business permit. If you want to do it in Davao City or Cebu City, you may do so. But for instance, you're gonna do it in Cebu City. Now, before the business permit will be fully issued to you, the first step that you need to do is having a barangay certificate. Now, the barangay is the first unit or the smallest unit of the society as defined in the Philippine Constitution. So you need to have to figure out which barangay or area, smaller area, are you located in terms of jurisdiction within Cebu City. Right then after, there's what we call Senro. That's more on the DNR requirement for your garbage collection, maintenance, and how you do your manage your garbage disposal. Right then after that, you'll have also what we call sanitary permit, but by the health department or city health department. They will be requiring also you and your employees who have worked in that office if they are capable of, in terms of they are in good health and capable of doing the job, because that's more on the health issues as well, especially at this as of this time. Normally, they will require you with x-rays and some basic medical requirements. And right after that will be your fire certificate for the Bureau of Fire. So normally, there will be an inspection for that from the fire department. If the building or the office space that you're renting couples or complied with the basic fire requirements from the office of the building officials. And just like, for example, if you have enough fire extinguisher in the office before they issue you the fire certificate. Then the fire certificate, along with other certificates that I mentioned, namely the sanitary permit, the Senro permit, the barangay certificate, will be a requirement for you to be issued with the business permit from the city. Once you have that, you're good to go, you're good to operate, and after you have operate and you employ people, then there will be what we call the mandatory deductions. And mandatory deductions will cover another three government offices, namely Social Security. So we do also have Social Security here. I think the same terminology that with the US. That also covers with a pension later on upon retirement age. And also what we call PhilHealth. PhilHealth is more on the Medicare or the medical insurance side. It does not give you a full access of payment in terms of or coverage once you'll be hospitalized here in the Philippines, but at least a portion of your hospital bill will be paid or subsidized by this PhilHealth office. And the last thing will be pag-ibig. Should an employee be opting to get a housing project or a housing loan, he or she can get that into the pag-ibig area. So basically, on that side, on the registration, we have tackled you need to go through three major government offices. And each government offices has their own compliances on a yearly basis. Monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, they have a lot of things to do. And I know moving from one office to another office in the Philippines, don't get me wrong, I'm just trying to give you what is the situation here in the Philippines. But that is still doable. You just need to understand the procedure. You just need how things work here. And by then, if you have those things or information with you, your expectations are well set. So once your expectations are well set, you can actually manage your emotions. Like here, okay, this is a different place that I have moved on, and this is how they do things here. And probably the next thing that you can do is actually adopt what needs to be done here. So we have covered the general flow of having the business registration, and now for the renewal, you just there will be time on a yearly basis. Just like, for example, your business permit will be renewed on a yearly basis. Your BIR need not be renewed on a yearly basis in terms of registration, but you're bound to submit an income tax return depending on your type of company that you have set up. It's either monthly, quarterly, and yearly. And also for the SEC, then that would be on a yearly basis, like for the audited financial statements, updated general information sheets, so on and so forth. And by then, for the compliances, that is what we're also trying to engage with our client and to give advice on it, that these compliances are not just for the sake of compliances, because they couple with penalties if you miss to comply with them. Just like, for example, non-compliance or non-submission of an SEC requirement would probably give you a $200 penalty. That's 10,000 pesos here in the Philippines. That would mean a lot. And I know you can afford it, but having that money to spend on that thing where in fact it could be used in much better productive way of spending it might be practical to save it. So those are the things that will be covering our business consultancy side, mainly on setting up registration for the business, renewal, and the compliances itself. That is why we have a good friend of mine, which is also an attorney, and at the same time an accountant, will be guiding us along the way. And we have also given them the liberty to talk to us, and at the same time know what is the situation, and probably will be giving them the best possible option for them to address the situation.
And so I've done some consulting over the years, and consulting there's a broad range.
That's true.
You can just give advice. You can sit down with somebody, hear the story, and give them some advice. You can get more involved and start taking over some of those chores, the accounting, the processing, the permits, and everything. And you can get involved in actually management, implementing. For instance, if a company wants to implement some policy that isn't popular with the employees, well, if the consultant goes in and does it, then the consultant is the bad guy. And he, when he leaves, it's
I was once experienced that before when I used to work.
But so my question is, how much of that do you do? How much are you? I know you're a growing, you're growing business. You've got the expertise. You've got the experts here. But how far involved do you get with the business when they come to you? How?
As of now, our involvement of the business consulting mainly revolves, as of the moment, for the registration, renewal, and compliances. But we are taking a look at right now on expanding more on the operational side, because the operational side couples with scope of work that goes beyond these three major concepts or services that we really had. Like, for example, we had a guy here who has actually been into the food and beverage industry, and I know that he can run the bar, the sports bar, wherein they can serve drinks, cocktails, and stuff, and they can also run the kitchen. And that is what we're trying to figure out right now, because we have clients like, hey, JR, I'm here in the Philippines, retired, but I don't want to be sitting on a chair waiting for the sunrise and sunset. I want to do something because I'm always on the road from my previous work, and I don't want to be stagnant. So if for example, they'll be opting to purchase a resort, then probably we can dwell with that, but it is temporarily stopped for now, or not being parked for now. And I mean not stopped, but because of this COVID situation. But for now, we are into the advice and the processing side of those three major things, and probably we'll be dealing with later on for the operational side, because at the end of the day, we can actually inject more services along the way, but we make sure that we are capable of doing the services that we actually tell you.
Yeah, if there's a need, somebody says, yeah, if I don't want to do this. It's too much. Do you have somebody who can manage this or help run this?
Yes, we will be exploring that one in the near future.
Okay, all right. And then one other question, important question, I think, and I've talked to a number of foreigners. There are many thousands of foreigners own resorts, own hotels, different things, restaurants here, and I hear the good stories and I hear a few bad stories. I listened to a video the other day, and all the comments were about the bad stories.
Wow.
But a lot of times you don't hear unless you're out there talking to the owners, which as I stop places, there's a lot of people very happy with their investment. But get to my question, a long way to get to my question, is how do you choose that 60% Filipino board members for your corporation? Can it be anybody?
Okay. Yeah, that is a very challenging question, because Once you actually appointed the other three, which will be controlling the 60% of the corporation, normally that they are a good circle of friends, the inner circle of friends, probably a relative of a girlfriend, or a spouse.
Okay.
So those are the common things. Way back before, we have encountered that there's a certain foreigner. I will not mention the nationality, but what he did was he actually get his driver and put it on the corporation, and the helper to be in the corporation. But when I do consulting, I do encourage the foreign investors to, hey, this is your investment. Why not talk it bluntly to the one that you selected? Because they're the one having the position. They are appointed as the president. I'm talking now on the setup of the domestic corporation. If you run a resort here, they will be the president, they will be the treasurer, and there will be the corporate secretary. Because as per corporation code, these foreigners on that setup of the corporation cannot be an officer. So they are basically the signatories. And sometimes I told them, okay, you just need to talk about it. Maybe they need jobs, and that couples with responsibilities out of that corporation. And I'm happy that they agreed on that, and they are starting to talk about it, because before they just say, hey, just sign it, you need to do it like this way. I mean, reality check, probably the foreigners are putting in financial investments and running the business. But at the end of the day, there are still people that you need to work with. So those are the things that they sometimes we do, like, I mean, in this world, you have the choices. It's either you proceed with what you believe that is true, but it's unfortunately you're not doing it right, or probably it will hurt you sometime, but you're doing it right. That would spell the difference later on.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because in my own mind, if I was going to do that, that would be the first big question for me. Well,
That's true.
who would I appoint because they're going to have some say in the company, on paper anyway.
Yes.
I mean, they're well, we won't get into that discussion.
Because that will entail a lot of things to be discussed.
All right. And then one other thing I know, in many things that you do in your various businesses, one of the biggest roadblocks, one of the things that delays everything is documentation. The people they've left documentation they need here back in their old country. In starting a business, are there any types of documents that they would need to bring? Or is just a driver's license or some ID, is that enough to?
Doing the incorporation, especially at the corporation side of setting up the business, one of the major requirements that they need to provide is their passport.
Okay.
And also there are times also depends on the processor, because there's a perception that how you present it to the SEC upon incorporation, so they would require an identification and the exact place of where you stay in the Philippines, and at the same time also a proof of what do you call that, a clearance here in the Philippines, which is the NBI clearance. So those are the things on the foreigner side. But on the Filipino side, since we're a citizen and resident here in the Philippines, then an identification will do, and also the tax identification from the tax office. So it doesn't mean that you have the tax identification number or TIN or TIN, you are paying taxes here. It may also be on the foreigner side, you have registered because you purchased a condominium, you need to have a TIN or tax identification number. But it does not necessarily mean that you will be filing any income tax return because you have not made any income derived out of a registered business. So those are the things that will be requiring you to pay up some, to file and pay for taxes here in the Philippines.
And part of what you do you do the filing for incorporation for
Yes, we do.
clients?
Yes, we do.
All that type of thing. So do you do they personally have to show up at the SEC to do this, or is that something you can do?
Yeah.
How much legwork does the
Normally,
foreigner or the Filipino have to do to set up the corporation? Can they just say, here's everything, let me fill the paperwork out, and you do everything for me?
Yes. By the first step that we need to do, we need to sit down with the client here in the office, preferably, so that they can also see us how we do things here, and that will be forming part of our evaluation. What are the things? What are the plans? So that we can actually do a roadmap already. What are the things that we're trying to do? So after that, they will be filling out the forms. We'll be registering it online. Then after that, if there will be signatures to be in place, we'll be preparing for the paperwork, and then we can actually submit that on their behalf.
Yeah, one other thing I want to add also. I occasionally get people make comments that, well, why are you doing this? Why, most of you know, for about 6 years, I've been doing videos and showing condominiums and showing, how to travel from here to there, different things, informational type videos. And I met JR about 3 years ago through a subscriber who said that, hey, this guy's really doing a good job for me, applying for an SRRV, retirement visa. You should meet him. We met at a coffee shop.
Yeah,
and
I still remember that time.
I know it was, I don't know, a month or two later where we did our first video. And anyway, this is all part of that. I provide expats and Filipinos with information, and JR has become a friend and a good resource for me of information. And I'm just trying to pass that information on to all of you out there. So anyway, thanks again.
Thank you, Rod, and cheers, everyone. We're gonna see you in our next video. And if you do have some questions, please let us know, and that will be one of our priorities with Rod for that question to be answered, and you need assistance with. Thank you, and take care, everyone.